Hi, this is Sarah from sarayip.com, Facebook, The Numbers Queen, and Instagram, sarayip1111, with a very special numerology and palmistry reading for the one and the only Marianne Williamson, author and US presidential candidate. Now, it's taken me quite some months to prepare this, and I'm covered with goosebumps even before I start. So the way I'm going to run this is as if I was reading for Marianne from a distance. I'm very old school and I do my charts by hand. And so I'm going to screen share, show you the charts I've done, also show you a picture I took of Marianne's hands when she was visiting in Brisbane. So I hope you really enjoy this. Obviously, it's just a preview. A true reading does take a few sessions and each of those is about an hour. But I can feel Marianne's spirit urging me to get a move on. So let's jump in. I just also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording this on the Gold Coast. So firstly, let's bring up screen for Marianne's chart. Okay, so number one is a chart. Alrighty, folks. So I'm a numerologist. That means I use your date of birth and your name to look at your soul contract. It's very specific. It can be done at home. All the workings, in fact, are on this template. And it's really just all about the communication and integration. So let's start. Marianne, here we go. Now, she was born on the 8th of July, 1952. I've done all the calculations here, so excuse my doctor's writing, but if I zoom in, basically it means that Marianne is a 32/5 life path in numerology. Now, I've studied all the life paths. There's about 45, 46. And so people with similar life paths, they have similar life journeys and themes. That's what we'll talk about today. So the number 5 in a chart, it is the star. Even in numerology, as you can see down here, 5 is in the center of the chart. I call these people the rebels and the freedom seekers. My father's actually a 32/5 with similar numbers to Marianne. And very often they travel the world multiple times, and even just as souls, they are very fast movers. They get it, they communicate it, they move on. Now, Marianne in this lifetime is likely to have had a challenge to her throat chakra, which is her 5th chakra, by the age of 5. She could be carrying this in from her lineage, whether it's her past lives or her actual family, or even something that's happened to her as a younger person. And what this can result in is some sort of excess or deficiency in the area of her throat chakra, which is around communication, being heard, being able to see both sides easily and neutrally. Okay, so what we also know from this type of numerology is by 32, she's taking back her power in that area, which we'll see soon. So she's come here to heal the throat in herself and others. It's no surprise she's considered one of the world's greatest public speakers. She's also doing a lot of work around her solar plexus, which is this area of the body, so here, and then the sacral, which is lower down. And this is very much the belly and the guts. So this is about the emotions, it's about communication, personal power. This is where a lot of people can get attached to being important or being in relationship. And again, Marianne's done a lot of work in this area and is able to free people from a lot of their, I guess, difficult beliefs. So people with these numbers of 32, they have a strong resonance with magic. Even words like fairy or dragon or circle, they have a 32 frequency in numerology. And if you've seen Marianne, she's quite ethereal. There's this quickness about her. 5 is associated with those mercurial personalities. Now, if we move down, and this is based on my research, and it's publicly available information. Now, I should mention that I'm obviously using what I've been able to find on the internet about Marianne and these people. Every now and then you do find that famous people change their date of birth for whatever reason. There's not much I can do about that right now, but I've done my best to tune in and choose the right people. So J.K. Rowling is a 32/5 as well. At 32, in fact, her book on Harry Potter was first published just around that age, within a few weeks. Beyonce and Jay-Z, both 32 fives. Angelina Jolie, Brene Brown, Gordon Ramsay, Russell Brand, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Sorry if I haven't pronounced that right. So what we can see immediately, big personalities, people who create waves, people who have a strong passion, perhaps a strong temper, who are known for their flair, for their fire. And Marianne definitely falls into this category. So obviously I'm just moving along fairly fast in this reading, but I hope you will still get a lot from it. At this point in a reading, I normally look at the name. So I'm just going to move my face. So what you can see, this is a table. And this is just standard Pythagorean numerology. Now it must be said Pythagoras is no longer alive. So when people call it that, that came into fashion 100 years ago. It might have been used just for marketing. We may never really know, but this is the standard type of numerology table. We use this table to do names, addresses, business names, all that kind of thing, even words. Okay, so what can we see now? I've used Marianne Williamson for this analysis. And when we break it down, we see that Marianne is a 5 life path with a 3 name. This is a very harmonious combination. I mentioned actually it's the same as my dad's. So I feel like there's always a healing with numerology. I personally just get so much from it, and I just love to share it, which is why I do these videos. And just to let you know, I have asked Marianne permission to do particularly her palmistry and reading, and her having a public presence. I've also tuned into her spirit and felt there was an okayness with me doing this. And again, it's all based on things that are already in the media and on the web. I've just put them in one place. So with her name being a 3, this is going to particularly define her work. The lips, and even if you look at this photo of her, you can see her lips are very much full of energy, and she is absolutely known as a brilliant communicator. Now, the 3 brings a lot of executive ability. This is someone who can manage, who can coordinate, and we'll see from her personal years history, which is coming up soon, that she does have a lot of governance ability. So the 3s are willing to say what others are unwilling to say or cannot see. There's an enormous amount of dedication, especially to families and children. Usually, everything with numerology is subject to free will. But 3 is the inner child and imagination. And so often you do see there is a softness towards the next generation and a desire to make the world a better place. So this brings also an artistic temperament, which of course can be lots of ups and downs. Emotionally, and we know Marianne herself acknowledges she's a very dramatic personality. Her soul edge with this name is a number 8. This is about the people close to her. It's how she conducts herself with others. The 8 is the professional. So she's probably extremely private. Look, we know, for example, that she has not released the name of the father of her daughter and keeps a lot of things on the down low. That's perfectly understandable given where she's at, what she does. In fact, you can see it all through her chart. 3 being a very open number, which is about her work, happy to talk about her work at length. 8, her home life, no thanks. That's just for her. She keeps it close to her chest. Now, the 8 energy is the boss, and that is someone who does like to have a fair amount of sway over others. And when they link with someone, it is usually for life. There's a deep commitment. Her inner dream being a 4, this is the heart healer. This is how people see her. I think if you've read any of her books or watched her talks, you could relate to that. And it is a stable number. So this was interesting. We can see in her name, there is a missing 7, and I'll just have a quick look down here. Now, she does have it in her date of birth. So just a minor thing I'd mention, for example, if I was, doing a reading for someone. So that lack of a 7 suggests in a formal life, perhaps not having that opportunity to get educated or to study spirituality. Again, could be something from the family lineage or from even past lives. I can also see a huge amount of numbers in the 1, 5, and 9 boxes, which is someone who is incredibly driven. A level of, I suppose, yang or masculine energy in the makeup, and there's that desire to really show up and action things. Now, I just wanted to mention that she also is known as Marianne Williamson. And so, for example, when I'm doing business readings or focusing on careers, especially with women, it's just so important to look at that name that people use because that's what's filling with energy when people think about you, buy your books, etc. So Marianne Williamson itself adds to a 4. We talked about this as the heart healer, even the empire builder, the heart of the operation. So someone people come to as a source of love or well-being or new structure. I note that there's this 13 prominent in that and also up here. Now I've got plenty of articles on all the life paths, things like Karmic 13. I also have Karmic 13 in my chart. This is the witch's number, the magic number. It's someone who can harm or heal through their words. Very often earlier in their lives, they struggle with being quite scattered, over-promising, under-promising, just trying to understand how to use language. But once they get a hang of it, often they make a living through communication. Okay, and so we see with this name, Marianne Williamson, there's a 5 soul edge. It's very flashy. It's very good for stage. And the inner dreamer, the 44, the master manifester. Now, it has to be said, she's pretty brilliant at that stuff. You only have to really tune in for a few seconds and you can see she's got a very clear energy. And I had the opportunity to watch her for a few hours. I was in the front row in Brisbane recently and, she's right there, looked at her hands. And I can tell you she's just clear as day. Definitely a channel. Okay, so we keep moving along. Okay, so what do we see from her date of birth grid? Look, it's very clear. Look, we've got the 159 line, which you have in everyone born in the 1950s. This is very much a survivor, people who came in post-war. The world was really wrecked, to be honest. And these children had to really pull themselves up by their bootstraps, raise themselves. This is someone who can just keep going no matter what the odds, but also often has to be encouraged to rest or needs a bit of a wake-up call to look after themselves or stop. He's got the 789. I have that too. This is those very active higher chakras from the crown up, crown, karmic soul blueprint. A lot of access to spiritual information, often gifts around energy healing, being able to read people, but sensitive, really needing a lifestyle where they can just turn on, turn off. Lots of nature time, alternative healing, that kind of thing. And can often find it difficult to be contained in a 9-to-5 type world. The 258, so those numbers, if I just show you down here, this is the grid. She's got all the emotional, social numbers. Now, this is brilliant for anyone working with people, especially difficult people or troubled people. So there's an ability to counsel, negotiate, create teams. And again, everything is subject to free will. So just because you have it doesn't always mean you use it to its full power. That's one of the reasons I encourage people to learn numerology, but also to talk to numerologists, whether it's me or someone else, because it's all in the translation. You can learn, for example, French from a book, but it's not the same as going to France or talking to someone who is French. You lose a lot of the pleasure as well if you don't engage. I just wanted to mention, so Marianne is 70 and gosh, she's just so vibrant, and a lot of these 32s or the 5s, they are called the forever young numbers, and they just have this vigor. It's incredible, and you'll see it even in her hands. Okay, so just moving right along. Okay, so this is intermediate numerology. This is basically where we start doing things like predictions and timings. So just top level stuff. Just to let you know, this does come from the date of birth. So what we see straight away with Marianne's chart is until 31, 32, which we know is a turning point. There's a lot of responsibility. It's almost like being a parent when she's born, looking after others, getting involved in relationships, and really having to sift through a lot of idealism. You can see there's a lot of challenges with her just straight up, even just from conception, pregnancy, coming into Earth, potentially. And I base this on some of the other modalities I've trained in. She's come in from another place. If you believe in star seeds, maybe a more futuristic place, for example, where people are telepathic or more compassionate. It has to be said, Earth is a bit rough and tumble. It's a nice way to put it. But there's a lot to do. It's a beautiful place, and you get a human heart. So there's a reason people keep coming in. And all I'm saying is that Marianne may really struggle with being a human and with basically taking the first step in things, because it feels like for whatever reason it could have been a bit rough there. So running on adrenaline is usually what you see. So 31, 32, we see she steps into this period of being an old soul, a wisdom keeper. Again, when we do personal years, you'll see this is just so accurate for her. And just to let you know, it's been accurate for the 5,000 or 6,000 people I've done it for. I didn't invent numerology. I just choose to use it because I find it very interesting and very consistent. So honestly, it's a language and it's worth learning, especially if you see codes like 1111, 777, 444. This is the universe saying, hey, you know how to do this. Let's bring it back. Because it can really bring so much love, forgiveness, and connection into your life and help you just understand people. So there's just an easier world and you can get things done. So we see 4041 going into this phase of greater love. So, you know, very much a chart that shows a bit of a late bloomer. 4041 being very difficult. You can see there's a rebirth there, which we'll go into later. 4950 the same, 5960 the same. Anyway, so yeah, look what we see is from 50s onwards, having that happy childhood or easier life that perhaps she wanted when she was younger but couldn't have for whatever reason. It looks like this is a soul who comes full circle in one lifetime. A couple of other things on this chart before I move to personal years. Personal years, so basically all you do is you add up the date of your last birthday, get a number. Again, plenty of information on my site. And so we live in these 9-year cycles. And so, for example, if you're listening to this in 2022, have a think back to 2013, there'll be some parallels. Not exact ones, but often incredibly striking ones. So what we see straight away is Marianne is 3 years into a cycle, and look, this coincided with a lot of her presidential ambitions, which we'll talk about again soon. She's currently in a 3-year, and we know that's brilliant for her destiny or career. So it's just interesting that that's actually when she came to Australia, Australia being a 3 country, so a perfect time for her. So yeah, I imagine in the next, even, you know, until mid next year, until summer 2023 in the States, there's a lot of breakthroughs for her, a lot of rebirth and just more healing of her own inner child and outer children. So there can be things like extensions to the family or just a life where there's a little bit less pressure and a lot more laughter and joy. And then she'll go from July into a 22 or 4 year, and this will be big as well because it triggers her known name, Marianne Williamson. So I'm not going to speculate too much here. I do a lot of predictions, but I feel like this is more of a foundational reading. But I can just say that from now on, massive acceleration for Marianne. Remember, she's a 5, she's a forever young. Don't underestimate her. Goosebumps as I say that. Just want to clear something up as well. There's many types of numerology. A lot of people, they change the personal year at January 1. For me, that wasn't accurate. Like, I tested it over and over again. It was just not accurate in predicting things. So look, the whole world changes years in January 1. That's called the universal year. For example, we're in a 6 year right now. But personally, I think the birthday or birth month is chosen and very important. So for me, I change personal year at or around the birthday or birth months. And that's just how I do it. Doesn't mean you have to do it. So just starting to wind up this part of Marianne's virtual reading. When I'm looking at a soul contract, I do like to take a step back. The experience I got with Marianne is it's like she came into this lifetime missing piece, whether it's missing a piece of herself, like physically or mentally or emotionally or spiritually. It's like she's looking for it in this lifetime, and along the way, she's going to help a lot of people. And it feels like the main lesson for her is to stay flexible. And I was really touched by hearing her talk. And at the same time, there were some surprises there for me. For example, she's talked, for example, about how she's never mentioned crystals in any of her books, and doesn't like the word New Age. And I just found that really interesting. I found it really interesting because for me, there's just a level of ancient knowledge with her, and it felt like it just hasn't quite clicked. But I bet you in the next 2 to 3 years it will, perhaps through her children, whether she has grandchildren or contact with the younger. generation. There's just something there. We know as a 5 life path, there's a lot here about connection, disconnection, especially from parts of ourselves that have been persecuted. So just very curious about that aspect. So what I'm going to do, hope you're enjoying it, is I'm going to go through her personal years. Now, in a normal reading, obviously, we'd have a lot more time to go through this, but I'm just hoping this will stimulate some curiosity for you. You can go find your life path and have fun with that. So what we're going to do right now is have a quick look at Marianne's personal years. So you can see I put a lot of work into this, and I do tend to overdo things. It's a bit of my nature. I'm an 11, so we always give 11 out of 10. If you just excuse me, I do need to have some water. No, this is the throat chakra color. Perfect. Right, so this is kind of, the next level of readings. And look, my passion is journaling, autobiographies, diarizing, and I just love understanding people's whole lives. So I have sort of done my best to just have a look through all the information on Marianne that I could find. Look, there's going to be things I got wrong and that I missed out. You can always let me know. I can update it later, but I've done my best in the limited time I have as the mum of 3 very cute young children. Okay, so what do we see from this deeper look at personal years for Marianne? All right, well, what I noticed is her mum, her lovely mum, her late mum, was a 22-4 life path, which is interesting because 22-4s often give birth to statesmen or stateswomen. You know what I mean? Like their children are often high achievers. So that was interesting. And at her mother's turning point of 22, that's when she got married to her father. So it just feels like very fated. Now, Marianne's from a Russian Jewish family, and there was a name change. Her mother, Sophie, was a housewife. Her father was an immigration lawyer. Interesting, there's that traveling energy again. Her brother, Peter, also an immigration lawyer, helping people to move on. And her sister, Jane, unfortunately, is passed, and she was a teacher. So what we see is Marianne was the youngest of 3. We know birth order is important with personalities. We know the third, there's that choice usually the parents have made to keep going with the family. She was traveling a lot as a child, and it taught her that everyone deep down is the same. Now, there's not a lot of information about her early life. I mentioned a lot of her numbers show she's quite private. So I'm going to move straight down here to where she's basically talked about what happened in her teens. So I've gone through each year of her life and I've matched it against her chart. It's a bit like astrology, but for me, I just find it easier to use numbers, and I find it a little more universal, so not requiring quite as much understanding of mythology and things. That could be my own background. So what we saw straight away is she had this personal year cycle change, 13-14. That is also a time when there were some marked shifts in her chart of waking up. We know star people, particularly the children between 13 and 15, especially the girls, anesthesia wears off and they realize they're highly sensitive people and they're here for a mission. That definitely happened for me. It looks like it happened for Marianne. So that's when at school, her teacher talked about a lot of propaganda around Vietnam. Marianne came home and said to her father, wow, is this true? And her father said, no way, we're going to go to Vietnam and find out the truth. And I just love that. I got goosebumps because you straight away see the 13 and its highest frequency, which is challenging the status quo, finding out what's really going on, digging. And so there we go, straight away Marianne using her 5 life path to wake people up, and with the assistance of her lovely family. We go further down, we know that in her early life, there was a lot of responsibility, ties to family, trying to figure out views on love and marriage, that kind of thing. Marianne herself has said she had a period in her life of bad boys and good dope. During that time, there's a lot of moving around, addictions, love affairs, breakdowns. She dropped out of college. She lived in a geodesic dome growing vegetables. I can relate to that. I think a lot of you watching can. And it makes sense because she's come from a family of refugees and migrants, and, just trying to find out what's the right lifestyle for her as a woman, as a person. So she's had this massive turning point, and we'll see it happen just after another personal year change. She's come across the Course in Miracles book in her mid-20s. And then basically after a few years of integrating that, in her 5 personal year, in fact, got divorced after a quick marriage. She returned to Houston. She's running a bookstore. She was singing. She started founding charities. Like, everything just started to activate in her. Now, I just want to share that actually I'm a numerologist because I was in a bookstore and a man came in who'd seen me in counselling. We studied together. He bought me a book called The Life You're Born to Live, which is Numerology by Dan Millman. And so there were some other things involved, but that was my turning point, which was at 29, which is significant because I'm a 29 life path. So there's something about books. Anyway, go back to Marianne. So we see in her late 20s, it's all starting to come together, this life purpose of being a free spirit and of helping people find freedom starts getting really strong. We know 32 is her big shift in numerology. So that's when the AIDS epidemic hit where she was living in LA. And this had happened after she had a major flash to close her shop and move with only $1,000 in her pocket. And it's happened in her 9 year, which is not only a major cycle change for her, but the end of a personal cycle. So she's just perfectly on time for this world event. And whew, man, am I getting goosebumps. Bet you are too. And this was what she came to do. It's like she knew at some level as a soul when she was 32, there would be some sort of crisis on the planet. And she was moved into place by her soul and by herself. And here's the thing is you are in a similar situation. You have been moved around your whole life by your soul, your guides, and you can call on them for help. You're not alone. So here she is, and she's at the epicenter of this tragedy, basically. And what does she do? Well, she's come from an activist family. So, she has a friend with cancer. She's inspired to start the Center of Living with a donation from David Geffen. She's doing it with Louise Hay, who we know is, the founder of Hay House. Louise is a 9 old soul. Marianne just is finding her angel wings. She starts Project Angel Food in her late 30s. She's pregnant with her daughter. And just as I wind up this section, I wanted to read you this quote. I have a dramatic personality, and if I do things right, it's a big right. If it's a wrong, it's a big wrong. That's something she said in an Entertainment Weekly interview, and makes complete sense. 5 life path, the star. 3 destiny, the speaker, and we know that's also the child. So there's very much that up and down energy, and just get it out into the open. I've got one more page to share with you, then I'll need to wind up this particular reading. I hope you're enjoying it. You just reminded me. My guys are chatting away. I'm also going to do a little tiny bit of palmistry too. Let me have a look. This is always fun, me trying to figure out my admin. Some things just elude me, honestly. So just a little bit more time on the numerology. Okay. So what we can see from Marianne's life history is just all through her late 30s, she is so busy. Her star is rising. She's having a lot of conflict with the centers that she's founded. There's a lot of political stuff. She's stepping down. There's a lot of accusations. She's having some challenges with the media. She officiates at Liz Taylor's wedding. She's counseling Oprah, and she's getting mocked a lot. Just to let you know, this is very common with people who come to be healers, especially those with strong 5 energy, because of course this is about sticking your neck out and turning heads, showing people a different way of being. And so often they're ahead of their time. So she ends up walking away from a lot of the things she started, although Project Angel Food is still going, which is amazing, and a lot of these other places are still going. So she's done all the right things. She's just had to look after herself, is the feeling I was getting. If we just move onwards here. So in her mid-40s, It's interesting, her work is becoming increasingly well known. She's released a lot of books at the end of her personal year cycle back 4041, which showed as a challenge because, of course, now I guess everyone wants a piece of her even more. So I noticed there's a pattern with Marianne of being misquoted or people taking the credit for her work. A very famous one being the quote often misattributed to Nelson Mandela, which was from A Return to Love. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. I think it's so fascinating. I feel like it's part of her numerology and soul contract to show people how often things get taken away from us because we're just not seen as the right vehicle. So it's like a type of exploitation. When I was looking up famous quotes, because I'm very much a stickler and I wanted to understand numerology, I was amazed how many of those quotes were coming from women, or even women from like I guess non-English speaking backgrounds, and they had been appropriated. So I don't think they're the only demographic suffering from this, but it was just so interesting. And honestly, every time you see a quote you like, make sure it's actually said by the person before you spread it, because otherwise, you know what, you're actually just closing people down even more. All right, so what's happening? So she's had a really major life shift when India is sort of around that primary school age. So she stopped teaching, sold her home. She joined the ministry and became a pastor. I'm not surprised. I mean, just the level of pressure she'd be under as a mom and as a director and with all that media stuff. We know that churches in general are an incredible source of energy. I chose to go to the church as a child, actually dragged my family. I'm pretty sure now that was a past life thing. And then I also stepped away, but I remember the food, the people, the music, and there's something about a large group of people devoted to a cause. It's just world changing. So anyway, she did become a pastor, and I guess you'd say it was like a modern type of experience. It wasn't like a traditional church. She had a lot of people speak at it, like Stephen Tyler, who's a master number 33. Look, she saw a lot of disadvantage as she was starting to be, I guess you'd say she's quite wealthy by this point, but she's still seeing a lot of discrimination against especially students at her kids' schools. And she's always been very open about talking about that, which is something I really like. We just keep moving onwards. I didn't want to focus too much on this part. Look, she was deeply affected by the financial crisis, as so many people were in the late 2000s. It's interesting. So this is the pinnacle she's currently in. So that's when she started running. This is around 58. She started running conferences, Sister Giant. And there's really a lot here around trying to root out the causes of poverty, really deal with that origin stuff. Interesting, because her chart also shows a lot of poverty and challenges in her early life. Look at how many books she's produced. Like really, she's just like a machine in that area, very much, I think, channeling, as well as extremely dedicated to getting the word out in this lifetime. And with that 159 in her chart, I mentioned, like they just keep going once they find a system. It's incredible. The challenge sometimes is to change up the system when it's time to, evolve. So what I found super interesting, because a lot of you know she ran for president, which is amazing. So when did this happen? So it happened around when she was 62. She ran for the House, I think it's called the House of Representatives. She came fourth out of 18 people. And she herself said, I failed well. I think it's sort of given her some sort of appetite. She's then at around 66, which is a time in her chart showing a point where she's wanting to leave a legacy, and she's at there's a lot of turning points in her chart right there. She announced her campaign. It ran for about a year. She did the Love America tour. Again, interesting, it coincided with just around the time of COVID, and there she was, talking about loving each other and creating communities. And so again, it felt like she was at the epicenter of this kind of world event, and it was sort of perfectly timed. Look, we know that she didn't continue her campaign. She's kind of, I guess, gone more into what her core business, of talking and that kind of thing. But I just found this all very interesting because, again, she was just right there in a way, spreading hope when the world needed hope. And also, I noticed that where she is right now, at the age of 70, her daughter's probably about 32. We know that children have a turning point at their parents' life path age. So very fascinating, very fascinating. All I can say is I see her being super busy. I see her having a very enjoyable later life with a lot of family and community and a lot of ease that she really didn't experience probably until now. I've got to start winding this up. So the last thing I wanted to share for today, and it'll just be quite brief because time and also the photos are a bit blurry. Where are they? Here they are. But just to let you know, it's a lot of energy for me to do this. I don't know if you can see, I'm actually sweating a bit. But essentially it's taken me a few months even just to kind of get myself to the point where I could do this reading. And I enjoy it. It's actually a bit of a challenge, but something I can only do for limited periods of time. It's a little bit it's like trying to run alongside an Olympic athlete. Excuse me, I have a bit more. So some of you might know I started life as a scientist, worked for the United Nations, Australian government, lots of ministers. Had a lot of life changes after escaping the 2004 tsunami. And palmistry actually is one of the reasons I changed career. Even when I was at the United Nations, I used to have these great chats about palmistry with the doctor there in Thailand. You'd be amazed, actually. You know, this is a very popular thing in Asia, and it's remarkably accurate. The hands are the tips of the angel wings, and the heart chakra are revealed. So I can hear my voice starting to go, and I've actually got my lovely son over there waiting. Mum life hashtag. So here's some key pointers about Marianne's hands, and then we'll wind this reading up. Okay, straight away. Wow. So she's 70, but look at her hands of a 40, 50-year-old. So whatever she's doing, I mean, we know she's pretty healthy and she's doing like what she loves to do, which is speaking and creating and communicating. It's just pumping her full of energy. So that's exciting. There's a lot of red on her hands, and that's often someone who does need to stop. So look, when I talk to her, as you can see from the blurriness of these photos as well, she literally had thousands of people jostling her. I was one of the first in there because I was in the front row, but wow. So there was a sense, you know, this was at the end of the night, you know, needing to stop. But also red can be someone who just does push themselves quite hard and gets fired up around issues. So hands of leaders often have a lot of fire element, often have a lot of red, hence the red background. Other things we see straight away, very prominent fingertips, very strong spirit connection and intellect. We can also see what's jumping out at me. It's funny, you know, again, this looks a lot like my dad's hands. He's got the same headline. So just briefly, I want to show you a few things. So we've got like quite long heart lines, you know, someone who does really empathize with people and thinks about them long after they've met. Really, how can I help people? We see some really strong cross and star markings on her Jupiter mount, which is not only luck and protection, it is the mark of someone who can lead and influence. They throw their weight around, so to speak. Straight away, we can see there is this separation in the headline from about the mid-30s. We know that at 32, this has probably started. Hands do match numerology most of the time. Numerology is the plan, the hands are the actual experience. It's one of the reasons when I have time, I like to look at both. So what this suggests is look at absolute, just throwing her whole being into her career from about that mid-30s. And the two separated fork areas basically mean communication, public speaking, performing, which of course she's brilliant at. You can even see a third fork there, which look, these look very much like writers and performers markings. Because the headline goes from side to side, it does cut the hand in half. I've actually seen this again on my dad's hand and a lot of other people's hands. There's a level of genius at play. This is the solar plexus. This is someone who has extreme discipline and endurance, especially mentally. I noticed when Marianne spoke at times, there was a slight impatience with people who didn't quite get it. I can imagine why, firstly. But secondly, look, her hands do show that she's just a very high functioning, smart person. And so, especially when the line's this straight, sometimes it can come across with frustration with people who think differently or like kind of ask a lot of small questions. Just wanted to mention. However, this is excellent for anyone who's explaining things, who you want to learn from, because they won't leave anything out and they themselves keep researching. But I guess the challenge is sometimes, as you can see, there's just this cutting off, whether it's from the feelings or the body. And so it just might be hard to keep up with them every now and then. I find myself almost gasping as I do this reading. So just to let you know, I don't have a headline like that. I'm a turtle. Anyway, so here we see her lifeline, so vibrant, so strong, lots of travel here with that big fork. The fork in the lifeline is common with star people, children of migrants, those who travel a lot, foot in different planets or places. Look at those triple lifelines, not surprising. So this is a lot of protection again. It's extra fuel tanks. These people can keep going all night after others have gone home. The biggest challenge, of course, is when they need to refill, they really need to completely switch off. So yeah, when they're on, they're on, when they're off, they're off. But a lot of people with this, they're pretty much like athletes, and actually physical training is great for them too. So just a couple more basics that I need to wind up. There's definitely a girdle of Venus here. These people incredibly sensitive to criticism. At the same time, that can be useful if you're creating work that is important, because you pick things up. These people have fabulous imaginations. They're great at guiding people. Often there's been challenges in the early life which have caused them to become extremely empathic, because of course it's the second heart line. Last couple of things. Look, the throat chakra finger or healer's finger, and also the throat chakra line, very developed on Marianne, as you'd expect from a number 5, and it's just the nature of her work. A lovely long finger like that. This is someone who's incredibly eloquent, especially with a tip like that. We do see it's a little bit low set. This is pretty common on people who are in, I guess, personal development. And it is that not only late bloomer, but they can be actually quite a shyness. And they themselves still need help, counselling, therapy, all that kind of things, which Marianne's been open about. So look, overall what we see from her hands, a lot of air, which is the intellectual, a lot of fire, which is not only a business person, but someone who gets things done. We see the thumb is really low set, so very generous person. And even just the pinching here, I'd say she doesn't keep that much for herself. And so for her, she really does need a crew of people to help her to switch off. Okay, well, look, I'm ready to have a little nap after that, but I hope you've enjoyed this. You can find your life path on my site, sarayip.com. Have a look at the links below. Definitely have a look into Marianne's work. It's amazing. Her speaking particularly is just phenomenal. It's just pure channeling, I reckon. I want to thank also Marianne for the opportunity to do this. I do consider it an incredible honor. In fact, everyone I work with, I always thank them, because for me, I learn something every time, and that's why I'm still doing this after so many years. So enjoy. Hope you had an interesting adventure like me. I'll be back again soon with more fun. So this has been Sarah from sarayip.com, Facebook, The Numbers Queen, and Instagram, sarayip1111, with a numerology and palmistry reading for the one and only Marianne Williamson. See you next time. Bye.